He didn't look like a man who once commanded the ocean. He looked like someone the world had quietly forgotten. Jack Delaney moved slowly across the hallway of the naval base, pushing an old mop bucket that rattled against the tiles. His back was slightly bent, his steps careful, his eyes tired, but still sharp, like a blade left in its sheath for too long. No one paid much attention to him. Why would they? To everyone here, he was just the janitor, a man who cleaned up after others, a man who didn't deserve a salute, a man who blended into the walls. But that morning, something shifted. A young recruit brushed past Jack, knocking the mop handle out of his hands. "Watch it, old man," he muttered. Jack didn't answer. He just picked up the handle, steady, calm. He'd lived through worse than disrespect. He'd survived storms that would have broken boys like him. But the scene didn't go unnoticed. Standing by the railing above, Admiral Thomas Holden watched everything. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He didn't even exhale loudly. But his face tightened, like a rope pulled too hard. He knew that posture. He knew that silence. He had seen it once before, decades ago. Jack continued working. The bucket squeaked with each push. The halls filled with cold light, reflecting off steel doors and polished floors. New recruits rushed by, boots slamming loudly. They barely noticed the old man quietly working beside them. But some did notice, and not in a good way. Two corporals approached him with smirks. "You missed a spot," one said, pointing at a perfectly clean tile. "You sure you're not too old for this job?" the second added. They laughed. Jack didn't. He dipped the mop again and continued moving. The corporals rolled their eyes and walked away, still laughing. Every sound echoed. Boots, metal, laughter. But beneath it all, another sound rose inside Jack. A memory. A memory he never asked for. He heard the low rumble of a submarine engine. He heard the shouts of sailors. He heard the blast. The kind of blast that changes a man's future in the span of a heartbeat. Jack blinked hard. The hallway came back into focus. He took a long breath and kept cleaning. Upstairs, Admiral Holden walked toward his office, his mind troubled. He had recognized Jack the moment he stepped onto the base months ago. But Jack had avoided him ever since. Holden never pushed, never asked, never approached. He sensed something broken in the old man. Something you don't drag into the light unless the person is ready. But today, something felt wrong. Disrespect toward any veteran stung him. But disrespect toward Jack Delaney? That was personal. Holden wasn't an emotional man, but Jack wasn't just a name to him. Years ago, somewhere deep under the Pacific's cold skin, Jack Delaney saved his life, and not just his. Holden clenched his jaw, remembering the classified report. Heroic action under extreme pressure. One man prevented a total loss catastrophe. One man. Jack Delaney. But that report never became public. Jack never allowed it. He refused the medal, refused the ceremony, refused the recognition. He simply walked away from the Navy. And now, here he was, pushing a mop across floors he once walked as a decorated officer. Except no one here knew that. No one but Holden. And Jack wanted it that way, until today. Downstairs, Jack finished the last hallway and pushed open the door to the maintenance room. His hands trembled slightly. Age, old wounds, or memories, he could never tell. Inside, he sat on a small metal stool. The room smelled of oil, dust, and old wood. On the wall hung a faded photograph, one he tried not to look at anymore. Young men in uniform, smiling, confident, alive. Jack swallowed hard, forcing the tears back down where they had lived for decades. He never cried in public. He barely cried in private. But sometimes The past pressed too hard. A knock landed on the door. Slow, heavy, purposeful. Jack froze. He knew that knock. He hadn't heard it in over 30 years. He stood up slowly. The door opened, and Admiral Holden stepped inside. He didn't wear the stern face of a superior officer. He didn't command or judge. He simply looked at Jack the way a man looks at someone he owes a life to. "Jack," Holden said quietly. "We need to talk." Jack looked away. "There's nothing to talk about, sir." Holden shook his head. "There is. And it's time." Jack's shoulders stiffened. The past was coming for him. Jack didn't move at first. He felt the years press down on him like wet canvas, heavy, cold, familiar. He stared at the floor, at the mop streaks still drying, at the faint trembling in his own hands. "I told you." "It's done," he muttered. Holden stepped farther into the room, closing the door quietly behind him. "You and I both know it isn't." Their voices echoed inside the cramped maintenance room. Just two men, both older, both carrying ghosts. Jack felt his jaw tighten. "Sir," he said, "whatever you think needs to be said, it doesn't." Holden didn't back down. "It does, especially after what I saw today." Jack let out a long breath through his nose. "You shouldn't have gotten involved." The Admiral's eyes darkened. "And you shouldn't let boys who've never seen a real storm talk down to you." Silence pressed between them. Jack didn't answer, because he couldn't. He'd spent years hiding in the shadows of this military base, sweeping floors to feel useful, to stay close to the sea, to avoid facing the truth. And today, all those walls felt paper-thin. Holden finally broke the silence. "You know, the new recruits are flying out tomorrow," he said. "Carrier drills, joint training, heavy ops?" Jack nodded, emotionless. "I saw the schedule." "They're cocky," Holden continued. "Too cocky. And when a man's that sure of himself, it means he's never been tested." Jack's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's the Navy's problem now, not mine." But Holden stepped closer. "No, Jack, it is yours. Because it was men like you who built the foundation they're standing on. And they don't even know it." Jack looked up sharply. "Good," he snapped. "Let them keep their distance. Let them think I'm nobody." He pointed at the mop bucket. "That's who I am now." Holden's voice softened. "That's who you pretend to be." Jack closed his eyes. He hated how those words hit him. The Admiral sat on a crate across from him, as if refusing to leave until the truth was spoken. "Jack," he began slowly, "do you know why I never told anyone who you really were?" Jack didn't respond. "Because you asked me not to." Jack still said nothing. "And I honored that," Holden continued, "for decades. But today, watching you get pushed around by kids who don't know a torpedo tube from an airlock—" "Let it go, Thomas," Jack interrupted, using the Admiral's first name, something he hadn't done in 30 years. Holden paused. It wasn't anger in Jack's voice. It was pain, real bone-deep pain. "Jack," he said gently, "what happened that day wasn't your fault." Jack's fists clenched. "Don't. You saved lives. Don't." Holden lowered his voice even more. "You saved mine." Jack's breath hitched. The room felt smaller, tighter. The memories felt louder. The alarm, the screaming, the water rushing, the darkness swallowing the corridor. The faces of men he couldn't save. He gripped the edge of the stool as if steadying himself against a wave. "It should have been me," he whispered. "Not them." Holden shook his head firmly. "You don't get to decide that." Jack looked at him with a hollow stare. "But I did. I made the call. I closed the hatch." Holden leaned forward. "You closed the hatch because if you didn't, the whole submarine would have gone down. We wouldn't even be having this conversation." A beat. Jack didn't breathe. Holden continued. "That call didn't make you a monster. He swallowed. It made you a leader. Jack shook his head violently. I don't want to be remembered for that. And yet you are, Holden said. By me, by the men who lived, by their families who don't even know your name. Because you refused to let it be spoken. Jack's voice broke. They didn't need my name. They needed their sons to come home. Holden's eyes softened with something rarely seen in him, vulnerability. And you gave them that. The room fell silent. The hum of a distant generator. The faint clatter of tools somewhere down the corridor. The soft drip of a leaking faucet. Jack wiped his face with the back of his hand. Embarrassed by the shake he couldn't hide. He stood up abruptly. This conversation is over. Holden didn't rise. Then answer me one question, he said. Jack paused at the door. Holden's voice dropped to a quiet, heavy whisper. If you were given another chance, just one, to stand tall again, would you take it? Jack closed his eyes. His pulse steadied. His breath anchored. Something old, something buried, shifted inside him. But he didn't turn around. I don't deserve that chance, he said softly. Holden stood now. Well, he murmured, deserving has nothing to do with it. Jack finally turned. Confusion, anger, guilt, fear, all fighting in his expression. What are you talking about? Holden's jaw tightened. Come to Hangar 3 tomorrow morning, he said. 0600. Jack frowned. Why? Holden walked past him, hand on the door handle. Because a ghost from your past is waiting there, he said, and it's time you faced him. He left the room. Jack stood there alone, heart pounding, hands trembling, breath shallow. He didn't know what scared him more, what was waiting in that hangar tomorrow, or the possibility that he already knew. Jack barely slept. He lay awake on the thin mattress in his small room, staring at the ceiling as the hours crawled by. The base outside hummed with its usual nighttime rhythm. Distant engines, the metallic groan of cargo lifts, the occasional barked order carried by the wind. But inside Jack's head, there was only the ocean, rushing, flooding, closing in. He blinked hard, forcing the memories back into the shadows where he had kept them buried for decades. 0600, he muttered to himself. What could possibly be waiting for him there? What ghost was Holden talking about? Jack rubbed his face, sat up, and slowly got dressed. His janitor uniform, the only identity he'd allowed himself to keep. As he stepped outside, the pre-dawn air hit him, cool, salty, carrying the faint scent of jet fuel. The sky was still dark, the horizon only beginning to bruise with the first hint of morning light. He walked across the base in silence. His boots echoed across the concrete. Lights flickered overhead. A gull screamed somewhere near the docks. Everything felt strangely distant. When he reached the massive steel doors of Hangar 3, he hesitated. For years, he'd avoided places like this, anywhere that reminded him too much of the man he used to be, the uniform he once wore, the weight of decisions he could never undo. But the door was already unlocked. Holden was expecting him. Jack exhaled slowly, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. The hangar was dim, lit only by a few overhead lamps, casting long shadows across the floor. Tools lay scattered on workbenches. A tarp-covered shape dominated the center of the room. Holden stood beside it. He didn't smile. He didn't greet Jack with warmth. He simply nodded once. You came. Jack's voice was gravel. You didn't give me much of a choice. Holden motioned toward the tarp. Take a look. Jack approached. Every step felt heavier than the last. He reached out, grabbed the edge of the tarp, and pulled it back. The breath left his body. Underneath was a battered, aging submarine escape chamber, the same model from the vessel he had served on decades ago. The same kind used the night everything went wrong. It was old, rust-bitten, marked with scars of pressure and time. But on its side, faded yet unmistakable, was a stenciled code. SSN 731. Harrington? Jack staggered backward. "No," he whispered. His heart slammed in his chest. His vision blurred. The room swayed. Holden stepped closer. "It was salvaged 3 months ago. The Navy classified it, sent it to us for storage until they decide what to do with it." Jack shook his head. "You shouldn't have brought me here." "Jack!" "This isn't a ghost," Jack snapped. "This is a grave." Holden didn't flinch. "You need to face it." Jack's voice cracked with fury. "Face what? The fact that I closed the hatch on men who trusted me? The fact that I survived because I condemned them?" His hands were trembling now, fists clenched. Holden's tone sharpened. "You survived because you had to keep the rest of the crew alive. Because someone needed to reach the surface and call for rescue. Because if you didn't do it, no one else would have." Jack shook his head violently. "You weren't there," he hissed. "You didn't hear them banging on the other side of the bulkhead." Holden went still. "I know I wasn't there," he said quietly, "but I know what they wrote." Jack froze. "What are you talking about?" Holden walked to a nearby metal case, opened it, and pulled out an old, sealed envelope, yellowed, water-stained, edges brittle with age. Jack stared at it. "I can't." Holden stepped closer, placing the envelope gently in Jack's hands. "This was found wedged inside the emergency kit in the chamber," he explained. "The Navy recovered it during the final salvage." Jack's fingers trembled around the paper. The handwriting on the outside was faded, but still readable. "To whoever survives, tell Jack Monroe we forgive him." Jack's knees almost buckled. He staggered backward, gripping a support beam to keep from collapsing. No, this can't be real." Holden's voice carried quiet weight. "They wrote it before they drowned." Jack pressed the envelope to his forehead, tears falling freely. They forgave me." His voice cracked. "But why? Why would they?" Holden stepped closer. "Because they were sailors," he said. "Because they understood the chain of command. Because they knew the choice you made saved others. Because they didn't want you carrying this alone." Jack sank to the floor, shaking. He hadn't cried in decades. Holden didn't touch him, didn't try to comfort him, didn't rush him. He let the silence speak for them both. Minutes passed, maybe more. Finally, Jack wiped his face and looked up. Why show me this now?" Holden crouched beside him. "Because this base is full of kids who think courage is about barking orders or showing off in front of the cafeteria. Because they don't know what real sacrifice is. Because the Navy forgot your name." "But I didn't." Jack swallowed hard. "And what do you want from me?" Holden answered without hesitation. "For you to stand up." Jack looked away. "I don't know if I can." Holden placed a hand on his shoulder. "Tomorrow morning, those rookies are running a high-pressure systems drill. They're arrogant. They're unprepared. They're convinced nothing can touch them because nothing ever has." He paused. "They need someone to teach them what the sea really demands." Jack froze. "No," he whispered. "I'm not." Holden cut him off gently. "You don't have to be who you were." He stood. "You just have to be the man who survived." Jack was breathing hard, staring at the envelope, at the rusted chamber, at a part of himself he thought was gone forever. "Why me?" Holden looked at him with steady conviction. "Because dead men forgave you, and the living still need you." He turned toward the exit. "Think about it," he said softly. "Sunrise, training yard." Then he walked out. The hangar door shut behind him. Jack remained on the floor, alone in the half-dark, the envelope trembling in his hand, his heartbeat echoing like distant sonar. He didn't know if he was ready, but for the first time in decades, he wanted to be. Dawn broke cold and sharp. Pink light spilled across the training yard as the first rookies shuffled into position, still half asleep, still grinning, still certain that nothing could touch them. They joked loudly, shoved each other, pulled off their caps and slapped them back on, carefree, unscarred, untested. Lieutenant Harris, the loudest of the bunch, paced in front of them like a man auditioning for authority rather than carrying it. "All right, listen up," he barked. "Today we run a full systems failure simulation. High pressure, low oxygen, zero visibility. You screw this up, you walk back to the barracks. No excuses." The rookies nodded lazily. None of them noticed the man standing in the shadows near the hangar doors. Jack Monroe, not in uniform, not pretending to be anything special. Just present, which for him felt like lifting the weight of an entire ocean. Holden approached him quietly. "You didn't have to come," the captain said. Jack exhaled slowly. "Yes, I did." Holden gestured toward the rookies. "You sure you're ready?" Jack's eyes followed the group. The careless laughter, the arrogance, the complete ignorance of what the sea can do to a man. He nodded once. "As ready as I'll ever be." Holden gave him space and stepped forward. "Rookies!" he shouted. The yard snapped to attention. Every young pair of eyes locked on the captain, until they noticed the older man stepping beside him. A ripple of confusion moved through the group, some whispering, some smirking, some rolling their eyes. Harris frowned. "Sir, why is the janitor here?" Holden didn't blink. "He's not here to clean." The rookie snickered. Jack clenched his jaw. Holden continued, voice icy. "Before we start the simulation, I want you to hear something. And you're going to stand there and listen, because you need to understand the difference between wearing a uniform and honoring it." He stepped aside. Jack inhaled, slow and steady. Then he began. "My name is Jack Monroe," he said quietly. "I served on the USS Harrington, SSN 731. Silence fell like a dropped anchor. A few rookies frowned, recognizing the vessel's designation. A handful stiffened. One swallowed hard, but Jack wasn't speaking for them. He was speaking for the ghosts. "I was the senior NCO in charge the night our systems failed at 900 feet, he said, voice steady but low. "We had minutes, maybe less, and the only way to save anyone was to seal the forward compartment." Harris scoffed. "And let the others drown?" Jack's eyes darkened. "I carried their names for 34 years, he said. Every night, every morning, every time I looked at the ocean." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the envelope. "But they forgave me, and they asked me to live the life they couldn't." The rookies stared. No jokes now, no arrogance, just silence. Holden stepped forward. "Rookies, Mr. Monroe is the only reason 11 sailors made it to the surface that night. The only reason a rescue was possible. The only reason the Navy didn't lose the entire crew. He let that sink in. He's here because every one of you thinks you're untouchable. You think pressure systems can't fail, that drills are a joke, that the sea will respect your confidence." Holden's voice sharpened like steel. "It won't." Jack turned to the rookies. "You want to know what the ocean respects?" he asked softly. "Discipline, focus, humility. The ability to keep your head when everything around you is collapsing." He looked each rookie in the eye. "Today, you're going to run this drill like your life depends on it. Because someday, it might." No one moved. No one breathed. Then Holden shouted, "Simulation begin!" Alarms blared. Steam flooded the mock compartment. Lights flickered violently. The rookies scrambled. But this time, their faces had changed. The smirks were gone. The cockiness evaporated. Their hands trembled with adrenaline. Harris tried to take charge. "Seal the forward." "No, no, not that valve." Too late. A pressure surge simulated a catastrophic breach. The rookies panicked. Holden almost intervened, until he saw Jack step forward, eyes laser-focused. "Stop!" Jack barked. The rookies froze. "Listen to the room," Jack ordered. "Not to your fear, not to your ego, to the room." They listened. They heard it. The hiss, the shift, the vibration. Jack pointed. "That valve is failing, that bulkhead is stable. That reading is a lie because the sensor's wet. Use your head. Breathe, act." Harris swallowed. "Yes, sir." Jack leaned in, eyes burning. "Don't call me sir, kid. Earn that right." The rookies moved again. But this time, with purpose, with coordination, with something close to respect. One wrong step, one hesitation, and the simulation would kill them. But they followed Jack's voice, like it was sonar leading them home. "Seal, compartment B. Redirect the overflow. Check the manual gauge, not the digital one. Now brace." A final shudder went through the room. Then silence. Holden checked the panel. "Simulation completed," he announced. "0 critical failures." The rookies stared at Jack as if seeing him for the first time. Harris stepped forward, swallowed his pride, and said quietly, "What was your rank, Mr. Monroe?" Jack looked at him, and for the first time in decades, he stood tall. "Senior Chief Petty Officer," he said. "United States Navy." Harris snapped to attention. Then he saluted. Not mockingly, not sarcastically. Not because Holden was watching, but because he meant it. One by one, the rookies followed. A rising line of hands to brows. A wave of respect across the yard. Jack's throat tightened. Holden stood beside him. "They know now," he murmured. "And so do you." Jack exhaled, a long, trembling breath that felt like it had waited 30 years to be released. "Yeah," he whispered. "I guess I do." Holden turned to leave. "By the way," he added casually, "the paperwork for your reinstatement is already on my desk." Jack blinked. "My what?" Holden grinned. "I'm not asking you to come back. I'm just giving you the choice." Jack looked at the rookies, at the rising sun, at the envelope in his hand, at the hangar behind him.